Welcome to Ask the Manager. We have an action-packed day here. Our guest is Christine Mowry, and she is our Director of Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services. And Christine has lived in Shrewsbury, and she has children in the school system. She is a Rotarian here in Shrewsbury, and you're Project Director of the Mental Health First Aid.
Yes.
Correct. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services and what you do?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I'm happy to be here. Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, the inception of the agency was back in 1983 as community services. And we started because there was a high incidence of violence and juvenile probation in town, and a judge actually coordinated the inception of the agency. And since then, we have expanded and grown and are really working hard to respond to what's happening in our communities today. So we are a clinic, so we do mental health counseling, grief counseling, family, individual, couples counseling, and we provide lots of social services for our community members. So things like fuel assistance, we're a SMOC application site. We help people connect to the housing authority for housing situations. Pretty much anything that comes in the door, we either manage, or if we can't manage it, we find the resources and connect our community members to whatever resources they need. And then Mental Health First Aid that you mentioned is probably my favorite program that we do. That is really an 8-hour public education program, and that's designed for adults that are in contact with young people ages 12 to 18. We see lots of onset of mental health issues before 14 years old, about 50%. And so we are working really hard. It's a prevention and education program, and it really gives people the tools to be able to identify early onset of a mental health condition, substance use, an emotional crisis, and we give folks the tools on how to identify and intervene and then connect those young people to services. So it's an 8-hour certification, very similar to medical first aid. You get a certification for 3 years. It's open to everybody in the community. So we welcome people to come to these classes. We train lots of parents, lots of teachers. Shrewsbury teachers are trained. We've trained 100 teachers in Westboro, 100 teachers in Northboro. It's been a very impactful, fabulous program.
Sounds interesting.
It is indeed.
And very busy.
It's very busy. We're also adding now an adult mental health first aid program and a program for older adults. So for people that are working with the elderly population, we see lots of onset of depression at end of life, chronic pain, those things. So we recognize the need for intervention with adults and with the elderly as well. So those programs are up and coming, and we'll be ready to roll with those in about a month or so.
And your office is moving?
We are hopeful that we are moving to the Higgins building next door. We are just working with UMass and finalizing some of those details, but that will be a big expansion for us. So we're going to go from about 1,200 square feet to about 3,500 square feet. And it's great because right now, unfortunately, we have a 4-month wait list, and that's the case really with everybody, not just SYFS, but the need is widespread. It's dramatically increasing, and we need to respond to that. So in addition to additional treatment rooms and additional clinicians, we're also adding some group programming and social emotional learning programming for middle school students over the summer. That will be new this year, called Summer Matters, and we're really hoping to get kids sort of off of those devices, and social emotional skills have sort of been lost with the social media, all of those platforms. We find that kids are really sort of addicted to that stuff. And so we're working hard to help them to learn how to manage not only their peer relationships, but family relationships, and how to manage their emotions when there are limitations placed on them that they don't like. That can sometimes cause a rift in families. So we're working on those programs, and we're really excited about adding that programming to our services.
And so how many employees do you have?
So right now we have 4 staff members. We have about 5 fee-for-services clinicians who come in the afternoons. They sort of make their own schedules and see their clients at our locations. And then we have 6 clinical interns. So we are working very closely with the schools. We have interns placed in all of the schools where they do one-on-one meetings with students. They provide some social emotional learning groups, and they respond to students who are in crisis.
That's a big help to the school department.
It is. We work pretty closely with the school. We're very fortunate that Shrewsbury, the town, the schools, is so supportive of us. So we thank you for all the support you give us. We work with a housing authority. We have a senior group that we run there weekly with some of our clinical interns to sort of help those seniors find some life balance and resilience. And that's very successful, and we love working with them as well.
And how often do you have patients with mental health issues that end up needing to be admitted to the hospital once you actually see them?
With increasing frequency, it's especially lately, we have the healthcare industry is very difficult to navigate, unfortunately. So we have, I would say, maybe 10% of the clients that come in are in crisis and need to be seen. Either we send them to either an ER or to community health and go to one of the other agencies that has a crisis center. It's pretty frequent.
So hypothetically speaking, if we look at what happened in Florida, do you have the confidence that systems are in place in our town? Not that something like that couldn't happen, but that there are good systems in place with your relationship with the schools and the police department?
Absolutely. We
Am
actually,
I taking your question?
No, you're not. You're not. Yes, I do think we have those systems in place, not only with our interns. We've had situations where we've had to send all our clinicians into the schools when there have been things that have happened that were disruptive and upsetting to the students. And with the police, we actually work pretty close with the police department and the fire department and animal control. We attend to the weekly triad meetings.
Animal control?
Animal control. You never know. You know, she sometimes responds to things that are mental health related. So we are there to support them, and we attend those meetings, and we're there to support all the town agencies as they need us.
We could go on for hours.
We could go on for hours. Make this a SYFS show.
Why not? So why don't you start with the first question?
Okay. So as I said, thank you for the support that you give us. We're so fortunate that the town is so supportive of our work. I'm wondering how you envision the development of the relationship between the town and SYFS.
Sure. Well, as you said, and everything that's going on in the world today, from simple issues or what could be simple issues of, youth interacting with each other and devices and screen time and all that, to a growing senior population kind of on the other end of the age spectrum. I think that we would be remiss if we didn't, continue to build and grow that partnership. I think right now we're all gatekeepers into that, with the ability to help people from a number of different standpoints, and they come to interact with town employees and Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services employees in a number of different ways. And if we're not talking to each other and relying upon each other and knowing that we all work together to make that net, then we're not going to be successful at it. Because as much in my political editorial that I think that, the weapon at the end of the day is what inflicts the trouble that we all hear about, there's many things that happen in an individual's life before they get to that point where we could help them. So I think it's, we need to continue to grow. We need to continue to understand each other's challenges and needs, and that's more than money. It has a lot to do with staffing and who's responsible for what, who has the lead on what, and how we communicate and bring all that together. So I haven't been to a triad meeting, but I just made a note in my mind that I should get there.
Tuesday mornings.
And learn about that, so I'm better prepared to help direct resources. But I think it goes across town departments as well, so maybe places that people wouldn't think about, like the library. That's a place where a lot of people interact with town staff that are often dealing with issues of loneliness or other things that, where people are kind of sheltered away and use the library as an outlet. Not a lot of people realize that, but I know it's something that our staff does work very well to be prepared for when those instances arise. So communication, just like every relationship, is one of the most important things, and not only will we provide financial support from the town, but also other communication and relationship support, I think, is important.
And incidentally, the Shrewsbury Public Library was among the first to train their staff in mental health first aid when we got this grant almost 3 years ago. So kudos to them. And we did a training with the librarians and the police department, and it was wonderful. And Ellen Dolan is right on it, and she's very aware that that is definitely a place librarians definitely need to be trained and really have increased mental health literacy, because they are frequently on the receiving end of people that are needing help. So from my perspective, I know what we're hearing from the police department and from EMS. From your perspective, are you hearing about an increase in mental health related calls, 911 calls, or mental health emergencies that they're responding to?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know if it's what we're recognizing that mental health is an underlying challenge that's causing some of those calls, or leading people to get into a situation where those calls are made. Maybe it's an education on my part. Maybe as a region, a town, a society, whoever we are, we're understanding the role of mental health more and more, and realizing that it's something that we need to be aware of. So I do hear that, whenever I'm working with staff, whether it's first responders or other individuals like Ellen at the library, that it's more in the forefront of their mind, and they are able to recognize it more. And I think when we recognize it, we can deal with it more appropriately, and not only hands-on at the scene or our interactions at the scene, but then also make sure that we place those folks into the right hands. And from the extreme, we don't incarcerate, because of something someone may be doing, if the underlying issue isn't really, them being a bad person. It's a mental health issue.
Okay, so one thing I've neglected to mention to you that we do at SYFS is that we are the coordinators of the Shrewsbury Coalition for Addiction Prevention and Education. And that's a coalition made up of several different sectors, representatives. So school people, we have business people on there, we have parents and youth representation, religious representation, government representation. And we put that coalition in place about 30 months ago as we were applying for some federal funding to assist us in prevention and education activities. So I'm wondering what the status of the recreational marijuana with regard to retail sales in Shrewsbury is, and what your position is on that.
Well, I'll tell you the status is that actually last night, since we were delayed a day because of the snowstorm, the Board of Selectmen voted to set a town meeting date for April 23rd for the community to consider for town meeting to consider 4 questions. The first question is whether to prohibit recreational marijuana sales within the community. If that question were to be approved and prohibited, then we'd skip the second question, which is to regulate recreational marijuana sales and manufacturing and research within the community. So that's the official status as it is, as it stands right now. The other 2 questions are related to taxation and actually consumption in public, which is the 4th question, which I think is important regardless of how the other 2 turn out, consumption within public property. So my opinion on the matter is that, from all of our statutory authorities as operating municipal government, includes police, fire, and everyone else, that we will enforce the laws that are in place and afford individuals the rights and liberties that they're afforded through the state laws. And from a regulatory standpoint, we will make sure that the community, if it chooses to want to have these type of facilities, that they'll be defined within areas that they're comfortable with. So I personally, as a father, see challenges on this drug in youth and it becoming commonplace. And I know alcohol is commonplace in our society, but I'm not sure that, and maybe I'm ignorant to the matter, but I'm not sure that alcohol has the same long-term impacts and perhaps the ease of use and consumption that marijuana does. So I do fear, again, as a father, that my children, as they grow into their teens, will be going to parties at their friends' houses that are innocent, and just like I did, with adults and everyone in the mix, whether it's an Independence Day party or, whatever it is, a Christmas party, and that this substance will be so prevalent that the open and, outright use of it will make it commonplace at a time in their lives when they'll be very influenced by those decisions and potentially impacted by their decisions. So personally, that's what bothers me, but from the professional standpoint, we will regulate and ensure that the lawful use where appropriate.
I think that you are right on, and I agree with you completely in that pediatric adolescent brain development is a time where brains are really wired to addiction very easily. And when we talk about mental health, we really see, as I mentioned, onset, 50% of mental illness beginning before 14 years old. And unfortunately, right now, the median span of time between the onset of those illnesses and treatment is about 10 years. So what we see happening frequently, we know that substance use disorders, 90% of the time, are co-occurring with a mental illness. So we see substance use sometimes beginning as a coping strategy for those young people who are not linked to the resources that they need and the help that they need when they do have an onset of any kind of mental health challenge. And really, I don't think there's anybody that can say they are not impacted somewhere in their lives by a mental health challenge or life challenges. It happens to everybody. So I agree, that's my concern with it as well. It's a pediatric developmental disease addiction, and that's where we have to be very careful. So more than 30 Massachusetts cities and towns have signed on to this nationwide movement of suing pharmaceutical companies for municipal costs related to the opioid abuse the crisis that we're facing with. What's Shrewsbury's position on that?
So officially, the town doesn't. The Board of Selectmen haven't set an executive position for the community yet, but I can tell you we're thoroughly researching it, and I'm confident that it's not a question of whether these actions should be taken against these manufacturers, because I think there is liability or likely liability for the court to consider there. It's just structuring the legal agreement between the town and the litigator that we would choose or the law firm that we would choose to make sure that there truly is no business or financial risk to the town as decisions are levied by the courts. And I'll just give you an example of that. It's a little bit complicated, but should a judge decide to award something other than monetary compensation, if these attorneys are working on behalf of the community and only get paid when the community gets paid, so to speak, if that happens to be a capital investment in the community that some individual drug manufacturer would have to make, then the attorneys would still need to be compensated at a 35 or 50% basis. So the town doesn't have the ability to say, okay, judge said you're going to build a $10 million treatment facility in the community. Now, Shrewsbury, you need to write a check to the attorney for $5 million because $10 million was transferred. So it's really that legal finite detail where we now have lawyers talking to lawyers to make sure that we're right. So I think we're on a path to join into that litigation and recover costs. There are true costs that the town has taken on that are a result of this epidemic that's within the region and the country right now. So we'll look to ensure that if we're able to have those costs recovered, we can, but we need to kind of protect ourselves from a legal standpoint at the same time.
Right. Okay.
So before you go any further,
Yes.
So are you a town meeting member?
No, I'm not.
Okay, if you were a town meeting member, how would you vote?
I think pharmaceutical companies should be held responsible for that. So I would vote that we join that nationwide movement.
What about marijuana in establishments in town?
I would vote against that.
That's interesting and helpful, I think, for a lot of people, because you can be torn. Well, if it's legal, why are we going to vote against it? And I just think it's helpful for everyone to have that understanding from your perspective based on the work that you do.
Yeah, I am also a parent. I have 3 teenage sons and a daughter who's a little bit younger, so we are living in that world where they're exposed, and like I said, substance use disorders happen during those adolescent years. It happens when those brains are going through such great synaptic refinement. There's so much going on during adolescence. It's such a dramatic period of change, and there really, today especially, there is such a complex web of potential mental health challenges for kids that we didn't see. Well, I'm probably a little bit older than you, but we didn't see when we were younger. And because services are unfortunately really difficult to get, it's difficult. We have a wait list. Everybody has a wait list. An appointment with a psychiatrist could take 6 months.
Hospitals have people in the emergency room for days and days and days.
Exactly. So because I don't think we, as a nation, have mental health support for adolescents as we should. You know, when we closed the institutions and everything was criminalized, and the jails have now become our institutions, and gosh, something like 70% of those incarcerated have mental illness that are going untreated. So I think really to get ahead of any substance use and the opioid crisis, we really need to get way ahead of the mental health issues that are co-occurring and the underlying issues. We see 90% of those with substance use disorder with mental illness. And we really need to treat those, and we need to increase, as a community, mental health literacy across the board. You come across adolescents, they might not be your kids, but we see them every day, and if we're all educated enough to identify before they start using a substance, even if it's as something as benign, I shouldn't say benign, but the perception is that marijuana is benign, it could lead to different substances, and during that time, that critical time of brain development, physiological development, emotional and social and mental development, I have big concerns about that, and I also am very concerned that it's so marketed towards that age group. You know, we see these candies and lollipops and gummy bears. Well, that's direct marketing. So I have a big concern about that. And as an adult with a fully developed frontal cortex, I don't really see marijuana much different than alcohol. I think alcohol is probably the worst thing out there, but it's socially acceptable and it's the norm. And so it concerns me that we would add marijuana to that.
Do you have anything you want to add? I have a question for you.
My frontal cortex may not be fully.
Okay, so, but why is it so urgent for us to have this town meeting in April? What's the main reason for us trying to get out there?
It strikes for one thing, it strikes a clear position of the community. I do admit that there shouldn't be a fear factor behind it. Like it shouldn't be driven by the fact that if we don't do something on April 23rd, that we're opening ourselves up to kind of the Wild West for marijuana. So that isn't the case, but I also think two other things. If we have the opportunity to come to consensus, that we will have a clear position and signal to the industry yes or no, and allow them to know that and not let anyone sneak through loopholes if we have the chance to kind of stamp that and solidify it. And then the other part of it is if we don't come to consensus, if we get if it's not voted to prohibit it, but we also can't carry a 2/3 vote on the regulation, then we need to go back to the drawing table and have more community conversations about, well, what is it that we need to do? Because then I really feel like the clock starts ticking and we're getting closer to the Wild West. I think in my mind, every day and week after July 1st, you know, there really is, we're growing in risk, and that establishments would be able to open, and further, we're getting closer to the end of our moratorium. And as you know, town meeting, although we can be pretty quick with it, you know, it's at least a month, you know, for us to get back, you know, if all things go right and we can line everyone's schedule up, you know, so we just start to run out of time. So it's not the end of the world if something isn't concrete on April 23rd, just like it wasn't, you know, before April 1st when we had originally talked about it, but I think the sooner that we make a clear decision as a community, the better we'll be.
So does the confusion with state ruling versus federal ruling add to the confusion for April 23rd?
It adds to uncertainty in the market for marijuana business people. more so than it does for us. in
What
my
about
opinion.
police?
The police are charged through state laws and would enforce things through state. You know, if there was ever an attempted or request for interaction, of course our law enforcement would support federal agents as needed, but their charges really come through the state, and you know they would follow that first and foremost. I can't, so that's the line that we follow. Whenever it would go into more complex things of a criminal nature, should it be deemed that related to banking and things like that, then the feds would have the lead and would have that responsibility.
Are there forums planned between now and April 23rd besides pre-town meeting?
There are not.
Because that might be something for us to look at, because I think if you can have experts like Christine on a panel where we can hear what they have to say, police, and hear what they have to say, get guidance, then we can come to probably a better conclusion. Because I know I have my conservative viewpoint on it. I'm trying to be reasonable and neutral, but yet hearing what you have to say lets me feel good about being conservative. And I think a lot of people may feel that way, or maybe not, but I just think that it might be helpful. So
Well, listen, I think that there are, some medical benefits to marijuana.
which is separate.
Which is separate, and I think regardless of what happens in the town, through our coalition, we're going to keep working, directing these normalization campaigns and our prevention activities towards the young people in our communities, because we know, we look at the school risk surveys, we know what percentage of kids are using marijuana or when they're trying it for the first time, so that the efforts will still be directed towards that, and we're actually seeking some federal funding to help us along with that. So we will be working closely with you no matter what, and we will make sure that we are doing our best to ensure that we're protecting our young people.
And there's so much more heroin use. And then now, I mean, every time you turn around, you find out someone has a relative that's died of a heroin overdose, which is probably more related to the fentanyl.
Yes.
But I think, that's an important, not important, but it's a crisis that, sure enough, we don't have water here, and now I'm going to have a coughing fit. But that's a crisis for first responders.
Indeed.
Because it's so much more common. That people need to understand, that when so many more people use heroin, and now the heroin they're using is so bad. So it's not just that heroin's bad, it's a bad category.
It is bad, and we're actually putting some of our staff members through Narcan, sort of train the trainer training later this month, so that we can, through SCAPE, offer that to the community as well.
Good. So, go ahead.
So, boy, that's a heavy topic.
It certainly is.
We could talk about that all day. Let's move on to something a little bit lighter. How is the town faring through this weather that we've been having? And how is the budget doing?
Yeah. So
And how's the commute?
And how's the commute? And how's the
Yes.
budget? And
So it's certainly been challenging, and I speak on behalf of those that have been challenged, because it's the highway, it's the first responders, the water and sewer guys in DPW, Parks and Rec Department, Parks and Cemetery Department, that are out there logging all those hours and able to kind of wow us that we get into, what was it, Wednesday morning, and the roads were black already. So we get a little bit of benefit this time of the year from the warmth of the sun, but it's because of the work overnight and kind of really from the first snowflake. I had a conversation with Highway Superintendent John Knipe on Tuesday or Monday, and he said, I plan on coming in around 2 o'clock in the morning. That's Tuesday morning, and then I saw him. Town Hall was closed all day Tuesday, and I saw him Wednesday a little before 8 when I got in, and I said, John, have you been home yet? No. Do you know what I mean? So we're working on the 36 hours of them being in. So a lot of effort. We have a lot of support of contractors, not as much as we had, but I think they've done phenomenally. They've gotten the roads open, they've kept them open. We haven't had any incidents with first responders getting out there and being able to get the folks during these events. Tip of the hat that always goes to Selco, because we were surrounded by significant power outages and the community stayed up. So they've done a lot of preventative work. They are very reactive and supportive, during the incident. So also can't forget to thank them. The snow and ice budget in and of itself was doing really well
Until this week.
until the beginning of March, and then when we have an event like the ones that we've had the past 2 weeks, that's $100,000 each event. It's gone. It's materials, it's time, it's equipment. These storms have been, very heavy. They're hard on equipment, and it just takes a long time to deal with all the roads and the sidewalks. And we thank everyone for their patience on that. One of the challenges when we have March snowstorms is the ground's not frozen. So as we're trying to push back in intersections and clean up sidewalks, the ground's not frozen and it gets, kind of really messed up. We'll be back in the spring, of course, to fix that. But, phenomenal staff at, those operations really run on their own under the guidance of John Knipe and Nick Rapepta, the working foreman there in the highway department. So I've got to thank those guys for all the work that they do. And the commute, hasn't been bad. I try to get in early to look and take a look at the community myself to understand when we get complaints, where they're at, what's going on, and be able to, see the perspective of the residents and listen to the diligence of the work that the crews have done. So, the state does a really good job on the pike and everything, so I'm always able to get here.
But aren't you happy to get to Shrewsbury, because there's definitely,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
when you get to Shrewsbury, the roads are usually
Yeah.
in better condition
They
than
are.
a lot of the places.
Yep. They definitely are.
I just have to ask, what did you think of the budget hearings? 2 weeks.
Yeah, they've been interesting. I've definitely enjoyed them. It allows me to get other people's perspective and see what other folks are looking at whenever they look at the budget versus what I look at. Oftentimes it's similar, sometimes it's different. I think it's a valuable conversation and a broader conversation to have in public about, gives the department heads the opportunity to share what they do. And I think it'll be beneficial in future years as we start to talk about goals at departmental level and how our budget requests are tying to the goals and why we're doing what we're doing. So I think there'll be opportunities there. Maybe some ideas for changes, but I'll hold them for now.
It's a long day, but it seems that we're more receptive to the discussion because it's the whole day.
It is. It's not rushed.
As long as we can stay on, schedule, which I thought we really did do a good job at staying on schedule, and I think that's Patrick's leadership that kept us there. But 3 weeks in a row might be a little testy.
Yeah.
That we're going to
Yep.
meet again on Saturday for the school department budget. But we'll see.
It's getting there. We won't vote for a fourth.
No, no.
So tell me a little bit about what residents might see on the warrant for the town meeting in May.
Sure. I don't think there's any surprises. I'll put it that way. It's more of the same. I think one of the biggest changes may be the level or the amount of investment that we're proposing in the infrastructure areas like water and sewer. Sewer mainly, we're requesting, about $6 million for sewer main improvements in Route 20. So I think it's more of an amount versus a different type of article that's coming forward or a different topic that's coming forward. So from a topic standpoint, it'll be very similar to prior years. There are 6 or 7 zoning articles. A lot of those are really routine matters and not a lot of substance or major changes as far as it relates to zoning. We have, have a capital plan as we have in the past. We've received 1 citizen petition so far. We've heard about a couple others. The deadline for that is next Wednesday. in order to be able to get on the warrant for the board to sign on the 27th. But I think it's going to be a little routine, maybe a little boring. I don't see any hot topic items even as it relates to zoning. So, and that's another reason. I think it was a good foresight by the Board of Selectmen to say, let's have the conversation about recreational marijuana outside of the annual town meeting, not let people worry about it taking up a whole night or what the next article is. We'll have those conversations in the context of one night and make those decisions, and then deal with the business matters of annual town meeting on their own.
I thought that was good planning.
I agree. So you mentioned water and sewer and maybe some funding coming for sewer, but we do have an aging water infrastructure. Are there any improvements planned there?
Yeah, so there's a couple of big improvements actually. So the first is underway, the construction of a new water treatment plant, which will come online, officially come online in October. This past Sunday, the main out of the new treatment plant was actually tied into the water main system itself, off of Oakland Avenue, right outside of the plant. So on Sunday, some residents lost water because we had to tie in over the course of a couple hours. But so that was a major hurdle to overcome. The building in and of itself is kind of shaping up. The main filtration and treatment equipment is inside the building. And then the second is at annual town meeting, we'll see a request for the construction of a new wellhead. It's about $850,000 off of Sewell Street to identify a new water source. The reason that we're looking there is because it has a very low manganese level and a 0 hex chrome level, so that's important for our water system, and it allows us to be diverse and be at a slightly different location and make sure that we have those resources for both a capacity and a quality standpoint into the future. So we'll do some other routine main replacement that we always have to do to keep up with the system and make sure we don't get into a deteriorated condition where we have a lot of breaks. A lot of that, that'll be focused in two main areas off of Edgemere Boulevard and Francis Avenue for summer construction season coming up.
And the traffic on Route 20 really backs up with the work that's being done in Worcester.
Yeah.
And so that will be pretty much for the summer.
It will be, yeah.
So people can plan their routes.
Yes.
I know when I want to go to the fish store, that's not the way I'm going anymore.
Yep.
So there's been a little confusion recently around recycling and what is recyclable and what is not. Can you shed a little clarity on that?
Yeah, well, I can try. So, actually, what is recyclable and what is not hasn't changed, but that's a tough message to give to folks because our collections have been very liberal, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, in the past, and that what we collected, we weren't as discriminated at the curbside in the past because the market was kind of flush and full enough where we were dropping these materials off that it kind of didn't matter. The buyer or ultimate sorter, which is E.L. Harvey of the town's recycling, was able to process, I guess, less segregated recycling products, and it didn't matter because they were kind of being shipped overseas or sent to U.S. plants for reclamation, and those markets were strong and they were willing to kind of take a little bit of a dirtier batch. But with some recent changes as it relates to the mixed plastics that go out to China mainly to be processed, we've had to be a little more discriminate because as Pellegrino's trucks pick up at the curbside on behalf of the town, when they would get to that facility where they were dropping off, they were being rejected or charged a significant amount of money, $80 per ton, which is more than we pay to incinerate the trash at Wheelabrator to get rid of that off their truck. So that forced them, on our behalf to kind of say, well, we're going to have to enforce the rules that are in place because that's what the market is dictating to us. And I think beyond the plastics, they took a look at the paper and the cardboard that was being recycled and said, we've got to adhere to the state recycling guidelines and what's in our contract agreement with the town. And while I do regret, and Pellegrino regrets, getting the implementation at the curb out a little ahead of the message, I think the last few weeks we've got that information out. Everyone should be receiving or have received a new mailer from us with a new calendar and some information about recycling on it within the next few days if it hasn't gotten out there yet because of the storm. But we're trying to catch back up to the new normal, I guess.
The new normal.
Right. All right, I have a question for you about WRTA.
Okay.
I hear that there's a possibility of eliminating the weekend schedules, and what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on Shrewsbury residents?
It's interesting. I had a conversation this morning with the Assistant Town Manager, Kristen Lass, who went to the WRTA meeting this morning. And yeah, the WRTA had proposed to reduce the number of routes in Shrewsbury from 16 to 8. So that is going to be a big challenge. So I've asked her to kind of work with the WRTA and allow us to identify what our ridership levels are on those 16 routes. And there's a public hearing coming up next week at the Shrewsbury Public Library with the WRTA to get feedback on those route reductions. So we want to go into that meeting informed and really lobbying the WRTA to make sure that those impacts that they're facing financially has the least amount of impact to residents and riders. So there's definitely going to be an impact. Unfortunately, it's a systemic financial issue that lies outside of the control of the town. We have certainly let Representative Kane and Senator Moore know, and they definitely support the public transportation system and are working to identify funds beyond what the governor originally earmarked in his budget. So there's a little bit of work to do, and we're going to go in informed and try to protect everything as best we can for residents.
And where do you see the Parks and Rec department going, and how is that developing? And is there opportunity for expansion, or where would you see opportunity for expansion?
Yeah, I think we certainly have room for expansion in the recreation areas, in the types and the amount of services that we provide, and I think that we're going to have to consider what we do in future years. We play a support role in recreation to private organizations as much as possible in scheduling fields, but we of course also do run our own programs, including summer programs. But I think young people's summer schedules are a little different than they used to be, and they do a lot of enrichment with the schools and educationally focused activities, which kind of has competed with what we do in the summer. So it's made it challenging to generate enough revenue to continue to run and provide our programs. So the amount of sites that we run out of this summer is going to be less than it has been in past years, but that's kind of what the market, so to speak, is dictating to us. But I would look to find new opportunities throughout the community. I really think in the coming years I'd love to find a way to have the human services aspect of the municipal government, which will include recreation, council on aging, the library, to a certain extent, to work closer together to provide more comprehensive programs. I think when people think of recreation programs, they think of little kids, when they think of the senior center, they think of really old people, but those are community and human service programs. So the more that we can integrate them and have those in the same space and working together, I think the more efficient we'll be as an organization and provide better services. So.
And I think that's somewhere that SYFS could probably play a pretty big role as we move forward with our expansion and our programming. We really want to focus on wellness. We really want to focus on prevention and education, and we really want to get these teens off the devices and back to connecting with one another and learning social skills, and we're working hard on that. So as we move forward, and as you move forward with the town's direction on that, please make sure we are working together closely, because I think that's somewhere that SYFS could really support Shrewsbury.
Great.
What about the Beal replacement project?
Sure.
What's happening there?
Yeah, it's ongoing. I mean, that committee's moving really quick. They will be before the Board of Selectmen actually for a comprehensive update. All their meetings are recorded, and individuals can watch that, but they'll be in front of the Board of Selectmen on March 27th. They're down to 2 sites. I was at this State House on Wednesday, testified on behalf of the Glavin legislation, which could be one of the sites where the school is built, and that bill looks to be coming out of its first committee and on to the 3rd reading. So, the committee has developed a solid educational program with the support of the superintendent and the wonderful staff at the schools, and now it's really kind of back on the architect to give us the shape of the elephant and what the school is going to look like, and we'll put our heads down on some initial drawings and schematic designs later this spring. Throughout the course of the summer, we'll refine those costs and further develop those drawings, and as soon as this fall, we'll be asking town for support for funding for that project and move into final construction documents. Puts us on a path to open the school, for the 2021 or 2022 school year, so it still seems like a long way away, but this preliminary design process has moved with great pace, and I think we're on our way to a great building.
That's exciting. So Shrewsbury's seen explosive growth in terms of population. If we continue to grow, or first of all, do you anticipate this population growth at the same rate that it's been going, and how does the town, how will it impact town services?
Well, geography and physical space says that it won't continue to grow. I think part of that is because our growth has been in single-family homes. The rapid growth in the 90s was in the single-family homes, but I think you can see the recent major developments are no longer 200 unit subdivisions with single-family homes. They're 250 unit apartment complexes, so I think that's the market kind of saying, what the demand is and what the availability is. So I think the housing market and the desirability of Shrewsbury will always make it a community that has greater than average growth. So we will have to continue to deal with those challenges. And I think that, the town is challenged as much by the expectations of ourselves that we put in the quality of services that we provide than the quantity of services that we provide. So we will continue to find a way to be as efficient and effective as possible. Proposition 2.5, of course, continues to challenge that on how much money we can raise to provide the level of services that we want. But surely the direct growth will impact educational services, and that'll continue to be a challenge. But I see a lot of struggle in town departments on a day-to-day. There is a lot of understaffing, in my opinion, that we could provide greater and different types of services to residents if we had a little bit more resources. So that's something that I'll continue to advocate for and find ways to talk to folks about.
Home invasions are usually not random acts. What would you like to tell the public about the recent home invasion that's been so publicized in town?
Sure. I mean, certainly home invasions are very scary and cause a lot of alarm within the community. I can tell you that we have, a police department that was on the scene within, a very short amount of time, less than minutes. And we took all the appropriate steps to both in immediate pursuit and evidence collection at the scene, and that you are correct that most home invasions are not random. There's some purpose behind them, but we're continuing to investigate this situation to the fullest to find out what happens. I get regular updates when appropriate from the chief. The Shrewsbury Police Department, as everyone knows, is a professional, high-functioning organization that will get to the bottom of this, and when we have definitive answers, we'll share it.
But people...
I don't see great alarm.
Right.
This is not a pattern. Nothing has happened since then. But, I'm not afraid to say that we haven't, captured a suspect or anything, because we haven't, but they're working on it very diligently. But we don't see further alarm or concern.
You want to talk about the salt shed?
Sure.
Go for it.
So years in the making, right?
Yes, many years.
We finally have bid results in for a new salt shed at the highway garage. It's going to cost, like 1.2 million, which is, I'm sure, greater than it was, when its original inception, how long ago. But we're going to build the right building. It'll be enough to satisfy and store our capacity for salt for the winter. It'll be a durable building that folks will still be proud of 20 or 30 years from now. It'll have some ancillary storage space off the side of it to protect our equipment. It's going to be not a bubble, not a marshmallow. It's going to be a permanent long-term feature in the community, a metal roof, well constructed. We have a Mass Highway certified contractor that's done other facilities, including in the town of Northborough. So we're happy about the bid, not happy about the number, but we're happy about the contractor and the final result that will be coming forth. And we're dwindling our salt supply without even having to try, so it won't be good from that standpoint for construction for this summer.
I want to go back to housing for a moment.
Okay.
We have been at SYFS seeing an increase in Shrewsbury residents that are faced with homelessness. Lately, it's been a particularly sharp increase for us. So I'm wondering what resources Shrewsbury has in place or might be planning to put in place for our residents that are faced with homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough challenge because homelessness is often silent, right? It's not something that, is readily brought to your attention or in your face, and so it is a challenge. I'll be honest to tell you, I don't know of the resources that we have in place.
So we have the Housing Authority.
Outside of you, but
we have the Housing Authority, but the Housing Authority has a wait list. So
Sure.
we're finding that we're placing clients on wait lists, and then they're just waiting. So I was just wondering if you had any plans in place, or what are the resources we might work together to come up with.
Yeah, I think we'd have to be honest with you. Can't say it's been a topic of very many conversations that I've had since I've been here, but if it's an emerging issue that we need to deal with, then I think we should
And
have
we shall
that
talk about it.
conversation.
Where are we on our Section 8 housing requirement?
I don't know the percentage of that either. I know we're not meeting, the required affordable obligation, but we've been very stringent in requiring the units to be built as all the new developments have occurred, and it was a requirement of Lakeway Commons and all the other recent developments, and certainly the affordable housing project off of Stony Hill Road will help, and get us towards the goal at some point, but obviously, even at 10%, we're still not, meeting the needs of the community if we still have, the underlying chronic issues of inaffordability. So
I have a question that you might not be able to answer.
Okay.
I'm going to ask it anyway because this came up recently in one of our staff meetings. If a Shrewsbury family is faced with homelessness and is placed in a shelter outside of Shrewsbury, is the school system in the town obligated to bus those children back into the schools here?
yes.
Yes, so we do that, regardless of where they're placed.
Yeah, either community is responsible. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What about the outpatient surgical center that's being constructed off of 290?
Yeah, so that's nearing completion, and we're excited about that to get it open. It'll be both a new place of employment within the community, and provided much needed services to a whole wide age range of citizens. There's a complementary, I don't know if the market looks at a complementary, but there's another one that's being built by Reliant Medical Group with the Fairlawn Plaza. So actually I was past there today and saw some pre-demolition work on the old Price Chopper. Looked like they were digging up the gas line and trying to cap that off and everything. So that structure will be demolished, and I think that's a good thing for the community and a good thing for the healthcare industry as it moves those type of services outside the four corners of a hospital, and hopefully it's a little more cost effective and convenient for individuals to receive those type of medical services.
Do you know what services they'll be offering?
I know it's outpatient surgery. I don't know the details if there's any specialties or specifics that will occur there. I just know it's ambulatory surgery.
Okay. That's exciting. Lots
It
of
is,
fun things
and
happening.
convenient parking.
Yep.
Okay, tell me a little bit about how your position here differs from your last position. Did you, Lester?
Yeah, Lester. So, I mean, it's really different because of the scope of work and the amount of staff that we have. And I'm still certainly trying to balance my role. And right-size the organization. So I think we have some work to do in organizational structure and analysis to make everything kind of operate as I think it should, and I guess could be more my management style. But I think my role in Leicester was more hands-on than I'll ever have to be here because of the staff that we have. But I also think that the use of my time is more effective, in helping guide departments and assist in decision making than it is in developing the budget. So I went through developing the budget or doing any other tasks like that. I spent hundreds of hours this year developing the budget in and of itself, and I've shared that workload with others in the office, and came to realization, this may be funny, but like I get it. Like I know the budget, and I feel comfortable that my time dedicated in the future in reviewing the budget and setting policy and direction and guiding departments and working on strategy and asking questions will be more beneficial to the community than me sitting behind my desk and actually crunching the numbers. So I think it'll be, that's kind of like a microcosm of it. It's something that I've really worked hard for in my career, and I've gone to a lot of executive type trainings and high performance organization type trainings, and it's something that I look forward to engaging more in. I haven't been out of my office enough. That's a fault of my own. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and look at the next task, but that's not always my job and what the community should expect of me.
What would you say has been your biggest challenge in Shrewsbury?
The biggest challenge is really still a scope of work. I'm starting to feel more comfortable and that I'm learning the background stories. There's a lot that goes on here. It's a very diverse portfolio of municipal services that we provide. So the community's bigger. I've never worked for a full service municipality before, water, sewer, all under one roof. So, those are challenges, and
It's so much fun.
It is so much fun. I love it, to be quite honest with you, and I'm enjoying it, but you don't ever want to make a decision at the detriment of the organization. So learning the history and understanding why things occur and how things operate, I think has been a challenge, but not something that we haven't been able to overcome. So.
And let me ask you my last question.
Sure.
On Positive Vibe, what has been your greatest success?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. That's always a harder one to answer. I think we've successfully made it through 2 special town meetings at this point. No one, I don't know. We've continued to provide high quality services, so I don't feel that we've undermined any, or I've undermined any of the positive performance and culture of the organization. I said in one of my first shows, one of my biggest challenges will be to not disrupt that culture, so I'm glad that we haven't, and hopefully no one in the community has said, what's this guy doing? So, I think those are positive.
I think one of his biggest successes is that he's gained the confidence of the community very quickly, because we were so comfortable with long-term case managers, long-term town managers, that we get the feedback that people have a lot of confidence in your ability. And with that, I'd like to thank you for being here. Time flies when you're having fun.
I guess it does.
We're
Thank you
going
for
to have-
having me.
We'll have to have you come back sometime soon. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.